Welcome to Government Contracting Academy weekly weekly webinar uh, with Randall Wimmer. Randall has won $2 billion in government contracts. And I got a question for you. What is the number one question people ask you?
Oh, that's an easy one. And there is no close second for this one. Well, actually, there is a close second, but the first one is can you really do it? Can I really do this? Is it really possible? But the real substantive question is the real technical question is hey, I'm a small business owner. How do I rapidly grow my small business? What is the easiest, fastest way that I can grow my small business in the federal government contracting industry? That's like I said, other than can I really do it? That is the one question that I get asked all the time, and I actually have an answer for it. And it's a very specific answer, and people aren't expected to actually get that. They think I'm going to give them something like philosophical, like, oh, you got to work hard, or you got to know your why. Some BS
cheesy.
answer. Yeah. But I actually have a really specific answer for that. The only way you're going to grow rapidly in the federal government contracting industry is to bid on large small business set-aside contracts. I tell people you just can't win enough. You can't sell enough cups of lemonade in order to become wealthy. You just can't. And that's what most small businesses do. They sell, in the government contracting the government contracting industry's equivalent of lemonade. Very small contracts, small subcontracts, small prime contracts, if any, and they can't have enough success in order to really be able to create wealth because the numbers are so small.
They picture small as easy.
Oh yeah, and it's actually the exact opposite. So they sell lemonade rather than selling lemonade franchises. That's the only way you're really going to create wealth is you got to sell you got to sell something big for a high dollar amount where you can actually maximize your profit margins. And in the federal government contracting industry, that is pursuing large small business set aside contracts. And then the next question that I get, because like I said, this is like boom, 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 boom. This is automatic. The next question is well, what's the easiest way for me to do that? And again, I actually have a specific answer for that. They're expecting like, oh, you got to work really hard and you got to do this. No. When you are pursuing large small business set-aside contracts, the game completely changes. First off, not many small businesses are going to bid on large small business set-asides. And the reason why that is because, this industry is really, really, really good at self-selection. Like, well, I'm not capable of doing this really large one, or I don't know. I've never written a really large prime contract before. I'm not ready for that. They would never give a company my size this contract. And the deal is that's that actually works incredibly to your advantage because instead of having up to 50 people, up to 50 companies bidding on a really small prime contract that everybody feels that they could do, like that 4 or 5 person prime contract, like, wow, I could do that. The government can think my company my size can do that, so I'll bid. Well, so will 49, of your closest buddies, as well. So if you were to bid on a 50 person contract versus a 5 person, now you're only going to have maybe 7 or 8 bidders, if that. And a big chunk of those bidders won't know how to play the game. In fact, most won't know how to play the game. So now the next question is how do you win these large, small business set-aside contracts? Again, I actually have a specific answer for that. It's all about risk. So most small business owners, they don't have a clue how their proposals are actually scored. And, proposals are scored the same way across the entire federal government. Each one of your evaluated criteria is going to receive a technical rating and a risk rating. Your technical rating is your technical compliance with the request for proposal. The other rating, your risk rating, is, what is the government's assessment of your risk performing on this prime contract? Risk is literally half of your proposal score. Half.
For good reason.
That. Yeah, for good reason, especially with small businesses and especially for massive small business set-aside contracts. For these massive small business set-aside contracts, risk is a hell of a lot more important than your solution. It's a hell of a lot more important than your past performance. Your past performances. It's a hell of a lot more important than everything else, because the government can help you with your solution. The government can help you, learn the culture of their organization if you don't have any past performances supporting them. They can teach you, they can coach you, they can drag you along. In fact, they can cover for you, because again, this is truly a partnership. They have a mission that you're supporting them with. It's so, it's to their benefit to help you be successful. But there's one thing that they can't do. They can't ensure that you can function as a company. There's no way at all that they can help you be viable in 3 months. There's no way that they can help you be able to manage the weight of that large prime contract. That's all about risk. So what does risk mean to them? It's corporate maturity. And what does corporate maturity mean? Well, do you have roles and responsibilities defined for key people in your company? Do you have documented, repeatable processes and procedures, or are you going to try to figure something out? How to do something every single time that it comes up. Like invoicing is a big thing. Do you already have an invoicing process in place? Do you have people who know the roles in that invoicing process? Do you have metrics that you collect on how well you are invoicing? Are you reviewing these metrics to make, in formal management review board meetings to make sure that you are doing it as well as you want to be or need to be doing it? And when you're not, do you have a change management system in place, to improve it? Are there any risks associated with your future invoices, that you are identifying, assessing, and managing? It's all about corporate maturity. Now, now this is the point where I have people, small business owners, and say, well, gee whiz, Randy, I thought you were going to help me out here and give me the easy solution. Now you got to tell me I got to grow up and be a big, mature company in order to be competitive. And that's not what I said. What I said is that you've got to project corporate maturity in your proposal.
Project.
How do you do that? There's, and it's a lot easier than what you think. This is what I did. I used the ISO 9001 framework to establish corporate maturity, to document my roles and responsibilities for my key personnel, to document my key business processes and procedures, to create a formal risk management program, to create a formal change management program, to create a formal metrics collection and performance measurement program. I use ISO 9001 quality management system to do that, because what ISO 9001 does, quality management system certification does, is it helps you set up the management systems for you to be successful. Most people focus on the quality piece of that, quality management system. And, quality is an adjective. That's what I tell people. It's like, you have quality management systems, high quality. That means your management systems are going to ensure that you're going to be successful, that you're going to be able to produce a high quality service or deliverable. And it's going to happen. So
low risk.
So yeah, low risk equals corporate maturity. And how do you get corporate maturity? The fastest, easiest way, you get it through ISO 9001 certification. One of the things that we do is we give, our clients a 100% compliant set of ISO processes and procedures. A lot of small businesses, they haven't been faced with a lot of things yet. So what they would have to do is they'd have to figure out and guess what would be the best process or procedure for it. What we've done is, we have, these processes and procedures, they've been used for well over a decade in the federal government contracting industry by small businesses. How do I know that? Because I used them for every single small business that I owned. 4 different federal government contracting companies used my ISO processes that I created way back in 2013 with my first company, and they've all been successful using them. So they're kind of like a how-to manual. So what we do is we give them the ISO program documents, which is, like I said, a how-to manual. And then what we do is we help customize them to their to their company, and then we get them ISO certified, and we have 100% certification success rate. 100%. Every single one of our clients have been ISO certified on their first ISO certification audit.
Awesome.
So now they have an ISO certification that is an irrefutable proof point, showing that they are one of the top 1% US companies with respect to quality management systems, equals corporate maturity. So they have the ultimate proof point by being able to say that their company was audited by an accredited third party and found fully compliant with the globally accepted industry best practices for management systems, which is the ISO 9001 standard. That is a proof point that you can hang your hat on. That is a proof point that 99% of US companies can't state. And that is a proof point that a company of one employees can make. You can be a one employee company and be ISO 9001 certified. And that's the trick. You can be a one person company and project more corporate maturity, being lower risk than a $20 million a year small business who can't say that, they're in the top 1% with respect to corporate maturity. So that is the trick. Get ISO 9001 certified, put yourself in the top 1% of all US companies with respect to corporate maturity, making you extraordinarily low risk. And then, that is over 50% of your proposal score by being the lowest risk bidder. That is key. If you're the lowest risk bidder, you're going to win 9 out of 10 times. Regardless of your solution.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, regardless of your solution or the number of past performances that you have, or the number of employees that you have. That is the trick. That is the answer. And a lot of people don't believe it. And that's why it's still such a really great answer, is because so few companies actually do it.
You just spoke to this again, so it might be redundant. I'm going to ask anyway. Dig into a little bit more from the government's perspective, because we're talking about a framework that's already accepted. And earlier you mentioned ad hoc, like making your own each company making up their own processes. From the government's perspective, maybe describe the reduction of risk by using something that's already accepted by all their peers. Like it's already considered good in comparison to trying to build your own framework, which functionally might be the same thing, but perception wise, totally different.
Oh, absolutely. Well, here's the deal. If you're going to be successful as a small business, you have got to have corporate maturity. That is a fact. There's no way that you can scale without having documented processes and procedures, documented roles and responsibilities. There's just no way. Without having, effective management review board, meetings, without making data-driven decisions, based upon key performance metrics. There's no way that you can be successful. And here's why. You're not going to have the bandwidth to do that. I won my very first prime contract, and I was not ISO 9001 certified. I won using a couple other tricks that I can talk about on another day, but I was not ISO certified, and I struggled. Even though it was a sizable prime contract, I was able to win it, but I wasn't able to perform effectively on it. I was struggling in my performance, and I was staffing up like crazy. I really was. I was hiring people. It's not like I was trying to do it on the cheap. So I was staffing up a full corporate office, but the deal is it doesn't matter unless they know what to do, unless everybody's working together, unless everybody knows their job,
coherent,
and they know how we do things, that you're not going to be successful. So basically, I had a gaggle of people following me around, cheering me on while I did everything, because I couldn't tell them how to do their own jobs, because I was winging it. I was just getting shit done, and we didn't have a corporate identity. And that's, you will not be able to scale. You will not be able to grow until you have a corporate identity. And what I mean by that is you have to have your own formal documented way of doing things. And until you have that, you're never going to be able to grow or scale. Never. So there are companies who figure all this stuff out on their own. They're not using, a framework like the ISO 9001 framework. They're doing it the hard way. They're learning it through the school of hard knocks, and they're like, oh man, we got to start catching these risks. Maybe we should be documenting them somewhere. Maybe we should be creating risk mitigation or risk management plans, and so they're creating the wheel all over again, and this is happening over periods of literally years if they're doing it on their own. But once they've done it, there's not a single proof point that they can hang their hat on that they're actually a mature company. Everybody says that they're a mature company. I can't think of a single company that would ever say, we lack corporate maturity, but we try hard. There's not a
we got spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to give it the old college try, but we really suck. Nobody ever says that on the proposal. Of course, they're the most mature company. Of course, they're the lowest risk company. And I have a saying when it comes to proposals, unless you have a verifiable proof point, don't waste your proposal's real estate by saying it, because it's never going to be believed. Never. It's 100% discounted. If you could say we offer a low risk, high quality, risk management solution, on this contract, they're going to read it as blah 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 blah. They're just going to just skim right over it. But if you have a proof point where you can say our ISO 9001, compliant risk management program does X, Y, and Z, and it has been audited, by an accredited third party and found fully compliant with the risk management standards in the ISO 9001, or risk management best practices in the ISO 9001 standards. That is a proof point that 99% of other U.S. companies cannot state.
The government trusts those audits.
Right? Oh, absolutely. In fact, the government, they look to industry as doing things better. Because the government knows that they're inefficient. The government knows, and a lot of that is by design. You don't want, the leader of the free world, blowing shit up and breaking shit in order to learn how to do things better. They're risk averse. They can't do that. Industry can't. I love your saying about, what you're saying about blowing up some rockets.
At the fast iteration, Elon.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So what they do is they look for industry to come up with better ways to do things. And one of the things that they're looking at is ISO 9001, because the leading companies are all ISO 9001. I'm talking about the IBM. IBM has got a lot of ISO certifications, a lot. They're probably one of the most credentialed companies in the world. And they're also one of the most trusted, most reliable, lowest risk. You want something done, give it to IBM. They will get it done, and they will get it done well. And the reason why is they have a brand, but that brand is built on corporate credentials. That and 100+ years of performance. But if you don't have that 100+ years of performance, you can still do the other half of what IBM does, and that is get corporate credentials validating that you're doing it in accordance with globally accepted industry best practices. So that's the other thing that I'm always asked, like, well, Randy, like, how can I do this? I don't have any past performances that are relevant in size or scope to this. And the way you overcome that is, again, through corporate credentials that validate that you're being low risk. And it's just like every high school student in the world, they're faced with that decision. They're saying, like, hey, I want this high-end job, but I don't have any work experience doing that high-end job as a consultant or as an accountant or something like along those lines. And so if they were to apply for a job to be a high-end consultant at McKinsey or Boston Consulting or Deloitte, we all know it's going to happen, and that's nothing. They're not going to give them the time of day. They're never going to reach back to them. And the reason why is because they're extremely high risk. They're a high risk and candidate for that job. So that high school student, pretty smart, goes to college, gets a computer science degree from MIT, and then goes across the street to, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They go to Harvard Business School. Now they got a Harvard MBA. Maybe they sit for a CPA exam. So now they have 3 credentials. They got a computer science degree. They got a Harvard MBA, and now they're a CPA. They have people standing in line to hire them now. They still have no work experience. but those credentials make them low risk. Wow, that candidate is going to be able to deliver. And we have a very, very, very high confidence in that because they're extraordinarily low risk because they got all these credentials. And that's what it is when you're bidding on these large small business set-asides. You've got these corporate credentials that can compensate for your lack of past performances and still demonstrate that you've got the corporate maturity and that you're low risk and will be able to deliver.
It's worth pointing out. So to get that college degree, that was an awesome metaphor or example or whatever it would be called. That's 4 years. How long does it take to get your ISO certifications?
Well, this is what's crazy. Not every, but most small businesses don't even consider ISO certification because they don't believe that they're big enough or that they're mature enough or whatever enough. And this is what it takes. You don't need a single penny of revenue to become ISO certified. You don't need a single customer to become ISO certified. You don't need a second employee to be to be ISO certified. You as a one-person company owner without any revenue, without any customers, can become ISO certified because this is the requirement. You only need to be operating as a business for 3 months in compliance with the ISO standards. And what we do is we give you all the processes and procedures and roles and responsibilities and manuals and risk registers and all this stuff to be 100% ISO compliant. We give you that. And then what we do is we also help you create auditable records showing that you're using the program. Now, so if you wanted to do this thing 100% by the book, a little over 3 months. If you're the kind of person, and I don't hold it against any people who want to do this, because as a small business owner, the whole world's against you. You can backdate this 3 calendar months, your ISO program dates, and now you're immediately ready for an audit, within a couple of weeks. But if if you don't want to do that, 3 months. If you are willing to backdate your documents by 3 months, hey, next thing you know, you can be ISO certified within a couple of weeks. It can happen that quickly. That's what it takes to become ISO certified, to have that validation that you are a ridiculously low risk company with tons of corporate maturity. Because those processes, those procedures, I'm talking about marketing right now. I'm talking about how do you look the best on a proposal by saying you have it and then being able to back it up with a proof point. But the other flip side about that is, man, your company needs it. And getting these ISO compliant documents and roles and responsibilities. And it's not, these roles and responsibilities are not tied to an individual. They're tied to a role in your company. Now, as a one-person company, you're filling every single role in your company: HR director, chief operations officer, chief financial officer, quality manager. You're doing all of it, but as you start to scale, you can give a few of those hats to your new employee. So you can say, now you're the HR director, now you're your chief operations officer, and I'll retain these other roles, but now you know exactly what your jobs are filling those roles. And you own the following processes and procedures. You own those. And these processes will teach that new person how to do their job. And then you tell them, say, this is the starting point. The expectation is you make these processes better. And we have a mechanism in place called the change management system in order for you to do that. That enables you to change things with my knowledge and approval of it. So we're all on board together, how we're going to change, how we're going to do things to improve our company. So like I said, you can't scale, you can't grow without having that level of corporate maturity. You just can't do it.
This popped into my mind as you were describing. We've previously talked about like a franchise model. That might be worth comparing here because it is you're purchasing a system that's already worked out. It's already ironed out. You're not developing it from scratch.
Yeah, that's something else too. It's most people they seek a franchise because they need that playbook. Like, hey, I don't, I've got the drive, I've got the intensity. I've got the passion. I just don't have the know-how to be successful in whatever industry that they want to buy a franchise in. I need a playbook. And in essence, that's what this ISO program becomes for you, because all of your major business processes in the federal government contracting industry are documented out and they're proven. I've had 4 different, federal government contracting companies that I've either been the primary or the only owner, or a primary owner, meaning, I'm either the largest or 51 or 49% owner of. And each one of those have been, wildly successful. My companies, after corporate credentialing, with ISO certification, we have won over $350 million in federal government prime contracts, pushing $400 million. So, we were able to do that by implementing this strategy, bidding on large small business set-aside contracts as the lowest risk bidder. And we were able to do that because of our corporate credentials. However, we were able to execute on them because we actually followed them. We actually lived the program, not just used it as a sticker. It's like, hey, look at we're ISO certified.
Really,
we actually followed it. Yeah. And like I said, it was a game changer, because like I said, you can't grow without having corporate maturity. But I never really thought of it as a franchise, though. Kind of like, getting a 100% compliant set of ISO program documents, that have been tailored for the federal government contracting industry for a small business, is being like a franchise. But that's exactly what it is. It's a franchise playbook. It really is. It's how to be successful. And I can't tell you that it's helped, every company. All I know is I've had 4 companies and they've all been successful, using that playbook.
I know for me, after getting them, there's questions I haven't thought of questioning yet, but having finding the process within the ISO documentation already gives me the impression that I have answers to questions that I haven't figured out how to ask it. Like, things are solved before I know it's an issue.
Well, the biggest problem is you don't know what
away.
you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And if you have somebody that says, provides you, a set of processes and procedures and manuals regarding something that you didn't even know was an issue or that you had to be thinking about, that is money in the bank. I'm telling you, that is money in the bank. And a lot of this stuff in this ISO program, especially for ISO 27001, Information Security Management, that is the hottest ISO certification going right now.
Yes, sir.
And the reason why is because information security is the largest risk that the federal government has with respect to anything that deals with information. It is like, we all know it. You can't pick up a newspaper without reading something about a cyber attack, a ransomware, issue, or you just can't do it. A data leak. Gee whiz, like just even recently with Signal, that, with having war plans released, accidentally to the press. It's like, information security is paramount. In fact, about 95% of all information that a white collar company would touch in the federal government contracting industry is either classified, controlled, unclassified, PII, personal identifiable information, or proprietary. So if you can show people that you are using the globally accepted industry best practices for information security management, you are golden. You're at the top of the list. Now, much of that program is not applicable to an ultra small business. However, there's processes and procedures that we provide you for when you do grow into it, that you have to have, to be compliant. But again, I would say about 75% of that is just not applicable yet to an ultra small business. However, you have those processes, those procedures, those guidelines, those manuals, all of that infrastructure in place for when you do grow into it. And so in essence, it's incredibly easy to get ISO 27001 Information Security Management as a really small business, but it gets progressively more difficult the larger you become, because a lot of those not applicable things start to become applicable that are really hard to pass an audit with. But now is the time to get it. get it before you need it, and then grow into it. You get the value of the certification, of the the proof point, of the credibility, and then you also got a roadmap that's fully compliant with industry best practices to get you where you need to be with respect to information security or what have you.
We are at time now. I know for myself personally, it felt like future proofing my company.
Yeah.
And I just spoke to that part, but it really did. It allowed me to focus on the things that absolutely needed me and not all these distractions of coming up with workflows for everything else, like you described
Oh,
earlier.
absolutely. I remember when I was getting ISO 9001 certified, we were working with a consultant, and basically they said, okay, Randy, you need a formal risk management program that does XYZ. And so I would get everybody cloistered in by my conference room, all my key personnel, and we say, okay, let's brainstorm. What should a risk management program be? Uh, because we need to have roles and responsibility for everybody's involved. We need to have processes and procedures. We need to have templates. We need to have, policies.
There's
We
a
need to have
lot to it,
guidelines.
yeah.
We need to have manuals. And it shut I'm not joking when I say that. Coming up with a risk management program at just one tiny piece of ISO 9001 shut my company down for about a month. And then, we created it, and then the consultants came back and they say, oh no, that's only about 70% about what you need. 30% you're off here. You need to fix that. And I'm thinking like, oh my gosh. So then we go back and fix it. So what we do, that's different than 99.9% of the other consultants, is we give you something that we know that works. We don't play, go find me a rock, and I'll tell you if it's the right rock when I see it. You don't have time for that as a small business. First of all, you don't even know what a rock looks like in many cases. It's like, I didn't know what a good, effective risk management program looked like. I never had one before. I'd never created one before. So it was just random luck, that it was going to be a good one. So that's the value of what we've done. We started out with a decent risk management program, but over a period of, 12, 13 years, it has evolved and it has improved, and it has, gotten better and better and better. And then we've had, no less than 100 companies go through our ISO Quick Cert program and get certified. And every single time the auditor sees something where we can improve the program, we implement it, and it gets better and better and better. So now I do feel confident in kind of calling it what you did, which is a playbook. It's a franchise playbook for a small business in the federal government contracting industry. Plus, it gives you a fast track to growth by making you low risk. Even as a one-person company can be the lowest risk bidder on a massive, small business set-aside bid effort. If they, get ISO 9001 certified and they connect the dots and write to how it makes them the lowest risk bidder. And we teach you how to do that.
We are at time here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, hopefully I can remember this thought. If the government had to choose between, let's say you had two equal companies and all measurable measures, if they had to choose between a company that had ISO or a company that didn't have ISO, which one would the government choose? Let's say everything else is equal.
Oh, they're going to go with the ISO
right?
one. The reason why is because that's a proof point.
Case closed.
No matter what the other company said, there really isn't any way to really prove that they possess the corporate maturity, to deliver on that large contract without having tons of other large small business set aside contracts. So if you have that, that's the ideal one. You can say, hey, we're already doing 10, really large prime contracts as a small business, which financially can't work. If you got that many of them, you're no longer a small business. So small businesses, by their very nature, by their definition, can't have a ton of proven past performances performing large prime contract, work. Again, you wouldn't be a small business if you had all that. So the primary way that you can prove that you're low risk is through these corporate credentials. And you can get ISO 9001, which is the most known and prestigious of any corporate credential. That, and I would also include CMMI appraisal, but you need to have 3 projects ongoing projects in order to get a CMMI appraised. But yeah, that's the way to do it. It's the fastest, easiest way to grow. You start bidding on these large, small business set aside contracts, proving that you're the lowest risk bidder. And again, risk is over 50% of your score.
Awesome. Well, let's end it here. Call to action. Reach out. Contact Randall or I. Reach out. Yep. All right.
Yeah, I think the Calendly. I think my Calendly link is in the comments below. So
yes, sir.
yeah, make sure you reach out if you want to do that. Like I said, if you're willing to backdate your ISO program documents, which most clients do, then you could have this thing hanging on your wall within a matter of just a few weeks, and being able to leverage it not only to mature your company, but also to start bidding on these massive prime contracts.
It's like a cheat code. There's nothing else out there like it.
I totally agree. Well, like I said, once I got ISO certified, my companies, we just started winning massive prime contracts, left and right. In fact, the smallest prime contract that I bid on, once I got ISO 9001 certified, it was $28.8 million. That was the smallest, so that's how we grew to nearly $400 million, so quickly. And that was done in 3.5 years. Now, again, there was a few companies involved. I had a couple, I was talking about joint ventures also. I was leveraging joint ventures to get access to other bid opportunities, but it was my company, so, leveraging it. But again, get back to the original question, the fastest, easiest, surest way to grow your small business company in the federal government contracting industry is being the lowest risk, most mature with respect to corporate maturity, bidder on these massive small business set-aside contracts.
This was a great episode. For our audience, join us again next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern.